Okay, Justice in the Tarot's Major Arcana. Traditionally the 8th card. In most modern decks you'll see it as the 11th. And we'll talk about when and how that changed, but regardless we have a very consistent image. You've got a woman with a sword in one hand and a pair of scales in the other. We're looking at a Tarot de Marseille version, so the predominant pattern throughout most of history, and spin-offs of it are fun, like this one here, but again, like I mentioned, consistent. And same thing with our next modern take. Love that. And you can see how you can just apply whatever artistic style you want to that archetype, that very consistent archetype. And at least as far as the main figure, this goes all the way back to the beginning. I say the main figure because obviously the one we just saw up above is gone, but here we go. Going back to Tarot's roots and the seated lady with the two requisite objects. Coming up is the 20th Century Standard, which basically informs, as you know, all subsequent or practically all subsequent decks. The late 19th, early 20th century Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, and although they were very apt to switch things up, as mentioned previously, they only did in terms of the number here. The inventor of the deck, A.E. Waite, but not the artist, that was Pamela Smith, went with the thinking of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Society. Secret society, semi-secret society, whatever, but this is a group of occultists that included the two mentioned individuals, or she at least was working with them. Anyway, you know, they grafted many esoteric philosophies onto tarot, so the 22 trump cards, the 22 triumphs, then related to the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and to the zodiac, and to the alchemists and related symbols like the one we're looking at now. So making all kinds of associations like that led them to believe that they needed to switch the 8th and 11th tarot cards. 8 and 11 of the numbered cards, to be precise. So, for instance, you know, there's a zodiac sign, Libra, that has scales, so they made an association there. Oh, this must have to do with that one. And they switched it with the Strength card, which has a lion, and there's zodiac sign with the lion. So, again, trying to synthesize these different thoughts and belief systems caused them to make that sequential shift. Here's another modern twist. Speaking of trying to tie back to other systems of thought, notice the heart and the feather on the scales there. And that harkens all the way back to ancient Egypt and the scales of justice. At the end of your mortal life, it was believed that your heart was weighed by the god Anubis on the scales, and it was put up against the feather of Mat. And that is how the life you had led was going to be judged. So amazing, because this really harkens back to thousands of years before the alchemists or the Christians, which we're going to talk about, or even the ancient Greeks, which we're going to talk about briefly. By the way, this depiction of the scales is from the Marvel show Moon Knight, which had all kinds of Egyptology in it. Here's Ethan Hawke, whose character had the scales tattooed on his arm, but it was much more than a tattoo. So many things from ancient Egypt influenced the great societies, great Mediterranean societies that came after it, that it's no surprise the scale motif can be traced out further, and the next stop is definitely ancient Greece and the goddess represented in this next image, Themis. And quote, Themis is the Greek goddess of law and represents law, order, and justice. According to Greek mythology, Themis was gifted with foresight and prophecy, and she was extremely wise. She is thought to be one of the most influential Greek goddesses due to her influence over other deities and the human realm, end quote. And now here's a different source, quote, personification of justice, goddess of wisdom and good counsel, and the interpreter of the god's will. According to Hesiod's Theogony, she was the daughter of Uranus and Gaia, although at times she was apparently identified with Gaia, as in Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound, end quote. Appropriate then that the Greek goddess that had this same symbol was the goddess of justice, and that's why she ends up adorning courtrooms all across the Western world to this day. At some point she picked up a sword, which of course we know, but also, especially in the modern, semi-modern legal context, a blindfold. This was obviously a very potent symbol and, piece of symbolism, so it made it into Christianity. And we're looking at St. Michael here, and notice, of course, what is being held in both hands. In Christianity, there's this concept of the virtues. There's cardinal virtues, theological virtues. The 4 cardinal virtues are very important, and one of them is justice. And we see her personified on the left. In fact, the 3 that are now taking up the screen all made it into the tarot. The 4th, off to the right, which we can no longer see, prudence, got left out. We're looking at justice, fortitude, or strength, if you will, and temperance. And we have to remember, especially because it's so downplayed by like 99% of tarot literature and teachings, the people who invented the tarot, although we don't know exactly who they were Christian. They were Catholics. And despite how much people want to pretend otherwise, there's a overtly Catholic Christian moral message in the sequence of the 22 trumps. And it's a really beautiful, inspiring, profound message, whether or not somebody chooses to believe in Christianity. It's definitely more universally applicable than that, as I've talked about in another video. The point is that justice, along with the other 2 cardinal virtues in this sequence, are qualities you want to have in your life. But anyway, those are the visual roots of the Justice card. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it.